Welcome everyone to Love and Pod, the weekly Trigun Stampede podcast. I am your host, Lady Zeon the Double Fang, and with me as always is my co-host, Kai the non-binary Typhoon.
Hi, I'm Kai Keta, and the passage of time creeping ever closer to me scares me every day.
Okay, now you're gonna have to contextualize that statement for the audience.
Yeah, for sure. That's the idea. One, I'm turning 28 this month, so that's gonna be fun, but that's not coming
Bitch,
up.
I turned 39 in 2 weeks.
But,
3 weeks? 3 weeks.
But yeah, no, I was just hanging out on my Twitter timeline, and I was seeing people from the Monkey Kid, artists and stuff that I followed from the Monkey Kid fandom, most of which are, between the ages of like 17 and 21, honestly, and saw them talking about the original Trigun anime in the context of they watched Stampede as it was coming out, and now they're going back and looking at the original Trigun anime, which they keep referring to Trigun 98, which is totally fair and makes sense and still breaks my brain that Trigun is not the default title. And it just really slapped me in the face with the original Trigun anime that was your favorite anime for at least over a decade before you got into Shirobako. Yeah, it's a relic of the past now. It's something to look back on and compare to other things. And also these people are freaking out that they're finding out that Vash is voiced by the same person who voices Naja. And not the other way around.
Take your shot.
Yeah, not the other way around.
That was a Monkey Kid reference. Take your shot.
Yeah. It broke me. I had a whole crisis on my Twitter about it. I went into my Discord server. I'm like, I got called a fandom grandparent. And I got called that in the server that is for, like, only people who are adults, right? And I don't know, man. I was just like, it really messed with me.
You just feel like your bones start aching and your back hurts, and you're just like, oh no.
Something that was like considered a, standard anime for everyone to have seen by the time I was in high school. It was like, yeah, everyone's had to have seen Trigun and Cowboy Bebop, There's a good list of those. And that was just understood.
There used to be, like, the holy canon of anime. If you were going to get into anime, here's your homework. Here's, like, your Old Testament before you jump into the new stuff.
Yep. Cowboy Bebop, Trigun, Ouran High School Host Club, Full Metal Alchemist. Yeah, it's just the idea that it was, if you hadn't seen one of those, you were the odd one out, and you got hit with the, what? No, you have to see it. Everyone has to see these. And now I'm, like, finding out that there's people who didn't even know Trigun was a thing until now.
Just put emphasis on the age gap between us. You talking about, like, the holy canon of old school anime, and then you tossed in Ouran, and I go, oh no, that one used to be one of the new ones. Oh
yeah, no, I wouldn't say it was considered an old school anime so much as it was
now.
Like,
it really
it is now, but like at that time when I was in high school and that list was relevant, you noticed I said Full Metal Alchemist and not Brotherhood as well. It wasn't so much that those were all the classic older ones at the time, so much as it was just the ones that everybody had seen. Because Ouran had a big reach right out the gate.
Yeah, I feel like there's like a handful of shows from that time, from that era, that are just like the must-sees, though. Like Ouran, Gurren Lagann, Haruhi Suzumiya. Yeah, thank you. I was trying to use, like, the proper Japanese pronunciation, and then my mouth just wouldn't allow me to. Because it's Suzumiya, not Suzumiya.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it would all have, like, that flat syllable sound to it.
Yeah, they don't put emphasis on individual syllables in their words.
Okay, so time to talk about the new episode of Trigun Stampede. Woo!
Yep, we're gonna find out if this next episode recontextualized the previous episode to make it better or not. So let's just get into it.
Alrighty. The episode opens with a young Nye playing piano. Vash comes up, is playing with him. We jump forward to a teenage Nye, still playing piano. A doctor comes in, and before they could really discuss anything, an alarm goes off. They go to the chamber where all the plants are kept. There's like hundreds of them, and they seem to all be dying. Nye wants them saved. The doctor isn't sure if he can. Some engineers walk up and they're like, oh yeah, the plants have hit their production limit. We're about to do a last run to get the last little bit of power out of them. And Nye just watches all these plants die. He just loses his shit, murders some of the engineers. That's when Vash shows up. We pick up from where we left off in the previous episode. Vash approaching him. Nye goes off about human nature and like this is who they really are and they're not worth saving. And then Nye goes and murders a bunch more scientists and Vash tries to stop him. And that's when we get the name Millions Knives. And he explains that, like, you know, he is an instrument of the plants. Like, he represents all the plants, and he is an instrument for them. He is literally millions of knives for them to defend themselves. Which, honestly, I think is really fucking cool. We'll get to that.
That's really cool.
Knives is trying to convert Vash over to his side. He's like, we have our own free will. We don't need to obey them. Luida shows up to try and bring Vash back. Knives wants Vash to kill Luida. Vash refuses. Knives takes a gun to kill Luida. Vash tackles Knives. Knives pushes Vash away and just starts choking Luida. Vash, in a state of panic, opens what appears to be some sort of black hole in his arm that's like sucking everything in until Knives flies at him, cutting his arm off. Luida goes to like pick Vash up. Knives is screaming at her to put him down, don't touch him. Vash pulls a gun on Knives, rejecting him, and Knives allows Vash to leave while he goes on his tangents about his plans to build a new world, a world for plants in the next 100 years. Flash forward, Brad is checking on Vash's arm. Vash is in fact at home. He is with Brad and Luida, and he finds out that everyone on the sand steamer, Meryl, Wolfwood, all of them, they are perfectly fine, and they are now at the ship, at home. Luida shows them their greenhouse with all of their flora, something that they have never seen before. Roberto is an asshole as per usual. Vash exposits about how he wants to save everyone, including Knives. Wolfwood kind of shits on his ideology. Brad actually defends Vash, saying that he used to be the same way when he was Wolfwood's age. Then suddenly Luida runs in saying, oh shit, we were attacked by worms, and they kidnapped Meryl and Roberto. Hard cut to Zazie the Beast. They are now in what is, I guess, is the City of July, which is a crashed plant ship carrier that's filled with a lot of dead red plants. Zazie goes on this whole spiel about they're at a crossroads. Who should the worms side with? The plants or the humans? He talks about how humans are repeat offenders, that humans destroyed the earth. And this is basically just like where the episode ends, with Zazie just kind of saying, who will he let live?
So I have an interesting note about the flowers that we saw. It's really like, it scratches my brain, right? I guess it's the right way to put it. I don't claim to be a florist who can or a botanist or anything who can recognize types of flowers super easily, but I see a field of blue flowers and I love Prussian history, but goes, hey, that was the national flower of Prussia, and it being the like national flower of Prussia is because of a story that Queen Louis of Prussia, Louise whatever, German. So I think it's interesting, or I can't be certain that they are meant to be blue cornflowers on the ship. That is what I thought of as soon as I saw them. And I feel like there's some kind of connection to the fact that those are the national flower of Prussia, was the national flower of Prussia back when that was a nation, because there was a queen of Prussia who was fleeing Berlin and pursued by Napoleon's forces, and she hid her children in a field of cornflowers and kept them quiet by weaving wreaths for them from the flowers. And I feel like there's something to be said there about, like, there's all this danger all around us. The world is, like, awful and scary, and yet home is, you know, sitting in a field of blue cornflowers, essentially. Like, I feel like there's a connection there to be made. I don't know if that's on purpose. I don't even know if those actually are cornflowers. I'm sure somebody who knows flowers better than me could probably say there's another blue flower that those look like.
I mean, there are
that's
plenty
what
of
came
blue
to mind
flowers.
from me.
I honestly didn't make any kind of connection like that, obviously. I will say, I'm not sure how much I actually have to say about this episode, because I feel like, much like the last one with the backstory, it's one that's kind of going through the motions, where you have just more of the backstory stuff, and it's basically just Vash runs up on Knives, there's a little bit of a conflict there, they talk about humanity and plants and nature. Then, you know, shit goes down, giant gateway thing opens in Vash's arm, it gets cut off, flash forward, and we're basically just already on the ship, really no explanation of how we got there, and, like, the entire story is now, oh yeah, we're here now, and then, oh shit, some bug man just took your compatriots, and it's just, wait, what? This episode is weird to me, and I don't have strong feelings on it one way or the other, honestly, kind of like the last episode. Honestly, I really wish we had done these back to back.
I definitely felt like, I guess it was the latter half, once it, like, got out of the backstory, it was in the present time, I felt like it was paced really weird, because it felt really fast all of a sudden. It felt very rushed of, like, okay, introduce Roberto and Meryl to home, introduce them to Louita and Brad, introduce them to the concept that these two are still here and are keeping themselves isolated from everyone because they're trying to turn this planet into Earth 2.0, basically, so that they don't have to rely on
They're basically trying to terraform.
Yeah, basically. And then suddenly it's off screen, Meryl and Roberto get, like, kidnapped, and we're freaking out about it. They got grabbed, and I don't know, did I just, like, go crazy?
No, you are entirely on fucking point, because the first half of the episode is still going through the motions of the backstory stuff, and just like before, it's good backstory stuff. I can't really complain. Then, the second half of the episode, we are already starting off on this ship. Where's my friends? Don't worry, they're all alive. They're also here. And it's just like, oh, Vash, these are your friends. Oh, you've known them for 150 years? Like, oh yeah, no, cryosleep. Oh, okay. Also, here, let me show you our flowers. Okay, hard cut back to Vash. Oh, fuck, they've been kidnapped. It's like, what? It's just, oh my god, this show
weird.
Just will not, like, you don't get to have, like, just, like, a small conversational moment with characters. Not necessarily to point, like, well, this is good, and now this is bad because it's different, but, like, the 90s anime as well as the manga, you would have moments where you could just, especially in the 90s anime, where you could just sit with these characters and let them have a moment and feel like people. And no, none of that. We have to get just enough information across before the next big plot point happens. And the next big plot point felt weird as fuck and just really abrupt.
Yeah,
because
abrupt
we didn't
is a
see
great
any
word.
of it. Like Louita might as well have, like, run in there and been like, oh my god, they just got attacked and kidnapped by giant worms. If you were to render that in CGI, it would cost so much money.
Oh man, that's a good point too.
Like, so honestly, like, there's so many things where it feels like they don't do a thing because, well, if we go and, like, animate the worms attacking and catching them, well, then we have to, like, animate, like, the dome shattering, and that's hard.
And that's, like, valid, but also this is not the way to work around that. You know, this is not the way to work around that kind of limitation. Abrupt is definitely a good word for it, because at first I didn't even realize that they were no longer on the home ship when it cuts back to Meryl and Roberto. I thought they were just in another room.
Oh yeah, no.
Because he had just finished saying to Meryl, hey, help me find a place to smoke. and then it cut, I'm pretty sure. I don't think there was anything else that was said between any of the characters. And so it's like, when I see them waking up somewhere, I'm like, did they fall and get knocked out? Like, did him smoking somewhere actually break something? What happened?
Uh-huh.
And I really felt like I was taking crazy pills or I missed something because I was like, what? What? Oh, they're kidnapped by Zazie the Beast. Oh, okay. Credit where it's due. I really like the way they have Zazie coming in and saying worms are gonna, like, he represents all the worms. It's the freaking Lorax of this world, I guess. He represents the worms of the world and is making the point of, hey, I'm pretty sure, like, you guys are all alien to me. Yeah. Plants, humans, you're all alien to me. So I need to figure out which one of you is the good aliens and which one of you is gonna Independence Day my house.
Yeah, it's just like, which one of you guys is gonna fuck me over? And you guys kind of already fucked your entire planet, so...
Yeah, and clearly Knives has gotten to him first, too, so that doesn't help matters with how the worms feel about humans.
Yeah.
And I also will say, I really like the backstory stuff with Knives and Vash as well today, or this episode, because even though I've read the manga and I watched the original anime, I felt for once real sympathy and understanding towards Knives' point. Like, beyond, yeah, I know people think this way, and this is how people argue, like, against pacifism to me, and I know it's real, but I never really felt like I related to or understood fully where Knives was coming from. I didn't feel empathetic towards him. Even in the manga, with the stuff with, all that happened in their backstory there, I still didn't really connect with Knives and his emotions of why he was doing what he was doing. Like, I understood it, but I didn't connect emotionally with it. But here, I did.
I definitely agree. I also really feel like I actually understand Knives, this incarnation of Knives now. In the 90s anime, no fucking clue. He's barely a character.
Yeah.
The manga, they do explore him a lot, and I fully understand him. I will say though that because of how out there his plans are, I think one of the things that helps humanize this Knives more is we still don't quite know what his plans are at this point in the story. We know that he wants to build a world for plants, but we don't really know what shape that's going to take. Because one of the things I feel that kind of, despite how ridiculously badass it is, Knives in the manga turning into a giant Final Fantasy mutant boss fight in the manga definitely kind of disconnects you from him a bit and dehumanizes him. Because he's literally just this fucking massive Tetsuo-y blobby flesh and angel wings.
Yeah.
That shoots death lasers.
There's also the idea where, I had gotten this sense originally, I think, that it was, again, even with knowing the backstory from the manga with Knives, I had always had the sense of it was a superiority thing of plants are better than humans. And now with this backstory, it really feels like it's a survival thing. It's a defense thing.
Yes.
They will literally kill all of our kind just for an extra burst of power. Mm-hmm. We can't trust them to be around. They are now pests.
I'm really curious to know what Knives was doing with those people. I can't tell, what his alignment was, what those people were there to do. You had said it would be really cool if they did an episode where it's now the flashback from Knives' perspective. And now I'm like, man, I really wish we had gotten that, because I don't know who the fuck any of these people are. Because Knives seems to be, affiliated with them until they start murdering plants for the sake of power, and then he murders them. And it's just did he not know what they were about? I'm very confused about, his relation to those people.
Yeah, and it felt like it was they didn't trust him and want him in there. They were, very hostile when they saw that the doctor or whatever let him in there.
Yeah.
And which was a stage in Vash's relationship with the people on home as well. Okay, but there's no way Vash had the exact same relationship arc with these guys that Knives did, because Knives got into this hating humans and wanting them all dead. he was mad that Rim managed to get in and save some of them. Yeah, like, I want to know, and I feel like we kind of need to know, because I can't make sense of it in my head of how did Knives get to the point where he's on this ship and he feels like a sense of betrayal from these guys because of how they're hurting the plants. Like, I got that feeling. I don't know if you did, but I got the feeling that Knives felt betrayed by how these people were abusing the plants. And I'm like, but isn't that why you killed all humans anyways?
He definitely seems surprised by their actions, and I'm like, isn't this what you expect? Though I definitely empathize with this version of Knives more, I feel like I have not a very good understanding of like how he got to where he is. Like, I feel like this episode helped characterize Knives really well, but then on the flip side, also made me ask a lot of questions about his backstory that I didn't have before.
Right, exactly. And I'm always somebody who makes the point of, like, all because you have questions or don't know something in a story doesn't make it bad. Like, stories don't have to tell you everything. They only have to tell you what's relevant to them. Stories are allowed to leave things open for you to fill in the blanks however you think it happened. This is definitely something I feel like needs to be filled in, because I am very confused. Like, they obviously want to flesh out Knives as his own character with his own arc going on, so we need to see more of it. We can't have it open about, like, how did we go from mad that Rim saved some of the humans to feeling betrayed by some of the humans and turning on them to hating them and seemingly living with them until that point. There's a step missing here, but we still have more episodes, so there's a chance. I really would be upset if the next episode started again cold open with backstory. Like, that'll annoy me a bit, because I'm like, okay, alright, pick a lane. Yeah! Quit going back and forth like this.
The way this story dispenses its backstories is suboptimal, to be nice. Like, as far as, like, the overall, like, the structure and everything, like, the second half of the episode felt really weirdly paced, and it felt like budgetary constraints. Like, they just didn't want to animate certain things, because, like, well, we would have to, like, shatter our 3D dome and, like, you know, destroy, like, environmental stuff, and that's hard. That's a lot harder than moving a character model around, so they just didn't want to do it, which is... That is my theory that I am sticking with. I just didn't want to fucking deal with it, which is why it was so weirdly done off screen. But there's a lot of little lines here and there. Like, when all the plants are dying, and the engineers are like, oh yeah, we've hit the production limit on the plants. And he says, like, you know, they've been cut off from the higher dimension and can't maintain their bodies.
Yeah, I want to know more about that.
So once again... like another reference to like another plane of existence of power, which was hinted at by Knives. Here it is again, a little bit more directly. So plants, as far as we could tell, get their power from some other plane of existence that they're able to tap into. And then when they're no longer able to tap into it, they can't maintain their bodies, and they shrivel up and die. So
this the way you just described that. So Vash's power kind of opens up this black hole looking thing that sucks everything into it, and they refer to it as a gate.
Fucking reverse angel arm.
They're referring to it as a gate. Now, when you hear the word gate, what do you think of? You think of, like, a door or a way to get from one place to another that opens up and closes at will, whatever, right? And we also know that Vash seems to have this unique ability to connect with the plants and talk with them. And when they're red and on that, like, oh, we're running out of power, heals them and gets them reconnected. I'm thinking Vash's power is connecting more directly to that other plane of existence.
Okay.
And that's how when he has the little head touch moments, when they're getting red, and like what this episode told us of, oh, they can no longer connect to the higher dimension. When they turn red, it's a sign of they can no longer connect to that higher dimension. And so if Vash's power, which is called a gate, is actually supposed to be a gate or a pathway, an entranceway to that higher dimension, it makes sense that when he does the head touchy thing with them and has a moment with them, he can reconnect them to it. he acts as that pathway. That's my theory now.
Okay.
That's why it's called a gate. That's why it seems to open up to this other place, black hole style. That's my theory now. I'm sticking to it.
And we did get to see, like, Knives actually, like, develop his blades out of nothing. Yeah, no, that is, like, a thing that he can do. Like, he can literally, like, manifest a metal-like substance that he chooses to manifest as blades. So, we at least got some mild explanations of that. Once again, I just like to say, the backstory, the origin of Knives' name, Millions Knives, that was sick. Like, him talking about, like, being, like, a tool or an instrument or whatever of all the plants. That, like, he is literally, like, the knife that they will defend themselves with.
He's over here acting like he is the, Michael the Archangel with the sword. Oh my god, the eye of Michael! Oh, it's all coming together!
Giving him an origin to the name Million... Because, like, in the anime and the manga... his name was just Knives, which is fine. But then, like, when he comes back and he's Millions Knives, I never quite understood why he went with that name, other than it just sounded badass. Which, you know, if that's your reason for it, legit, it does sound badass. But, like, giving it, like, a meaning to it like that just made it so much fucking cooler. Like, I almost fucking, like, clapped when he said that. I'm like, oh, that's so fucking cool.
Why couldn't we get that with Gigi the Mine? Was it Gigi? What was his name?
E.G. the Mine.
E.G. the Mine. I figured, no, Gigi means good game. God, Kai, come on, get it together. Yeah, no, I wish we could have gotten, like, a cool explanation for that, because that name change happened. They can obviously do it.
Okay, so I am realizing that it seems like we're not gonna have, like, the gung-ho guns, like, in the shape that we normally have them in, because we had Monev the Gale, which wasn't even called Monev the Gale, and like, he was basically just Monev in design only. Really just a completely different character. And then you have, like, Wolfwood and Levio and, like, you know, Monev, like, they're all parts of, like, the Eye of Michael, like, experimentations that, like, are all done in the name of Knives.
Yeah, it does feel like, beyond the ones who are connected with, like, experimentation of the Eye of Michael, it does feel like they kind of are acting mostly independently.
Yeah.
You know, as opposed to one solid gung-ho gun group.
But then you have characters like Legato, or E.G. Mine, or Zazie the Beast, and they seem to be independent.
Yeah.
Like, they seem to just be their own people, especially Zazie.
Zazie straight up told us this episode that he will work with whoever can convince him that they're better for the planet.
Zazie is just in it for himself, which, fair. Legato... he is, like, drinking that Kool-Aid. Legato is, like, a devout Knives stan. Like he is at all those concerts rocking his Millions Knives t-shirts.
He's writing him fan mail with little hearts on the eyes, all that stuff.
His AO3 is full of so many Knives fanfics.
Knives X-Reader.
So we seem to have, like, these henchmen, because they're not even, like, you know, the gung-ho guns as we know them. Like, we have these henchmen, and some of them are experiments done under the Eye of Michael, which is a religion that worships knives. And then we have just a bunch of independent agents, like Legato, who knows, maybe Legato's psychic powers come from some sort of experimentation from Knives, because it feels like all the weird shit now has to come from Knives. Yeah. We can't just have people who are just weird as shit.
Yeah, we have to explain everything.
What's your tragic backstory?
I do feel like a little, I can't think of I know there's a term out there for this, but I do feel a little bit like kind of left to dry on Legato, Livio, and Wolfwood's thing right now, because they were there, and I guess I can forgive it because it's a matter of, like, we had to have a moment of looking at the backstory, and that's what's taken up our time to be able to get back to what is up with those guys.
Okay, like, I agree with that, but also I feel like it was very poorly placed.
Yeah.
Because we had all this backstory stuff that was happening in the middle of events, like current day events with Levio and Wolfwood, and then we have this big reveal at the end of an episode, and then the following episode is oops, all flashback, and then the next episode is even more flashback because it ended on a cliffhanger, and then the second half is like, okay, well, we need to like establish a bunch of story things, like get all like the bare minimum stuff out of the way, and okay, cool, new conflict. They've now been kidnapped by Zazie off screen.
I gotta say, I think off-putting is a good word for it, because it feels like I'm getting jerked around, which it might be something that, I mean, now I don't know for sure. It could be either or. Like, if you binge the whole thing in one sitting, is it going to feel more disjointed, or is it going to feel more cohesive?
Is it going to feel like a 8-hour movie?
Yeah.
Which, honestly, I fucking hate that shit. Fuck prestige television.
I know that, like, when Steven Universe was coming out, it felt weird because of the way that they would drop mass amounts of episodes, and so it would get really annoying having all these episodes of, like, just the characters, you know, messing around, but then, you know, in the middle of, like, just having big plot points and we want to get back to the main plot. But then when you watch the whole thing all together, you know, it actually feels a lot better. And so it was really just a symptom of how it was released.
Yeah, like, in the case of that show, though, like, there was, like, these huge gaps.
Yeah.
This isn't, like, huge gaps. This is just, like, a regular weekly release schedule. And we go from this cliffhanger, because, like, imagine that even if you're watching these episodes all back-to-back, you have cliffhanger of what the fuck's up with Vash. Like, especially if you're, like, a new viewer and you don't know this backstory stuff already. And then it's just like, we are now just in backstory central for an episode and a half. And then when we flash forward to like the present day, Vash is already on the ship at home. Wolfwood and everyone else is also already there. And it's just normal. No explanation of how this happened. How they knew where Vash was, how they knew to get him, who brought who where.
Yeah.
Who, what, how, where, why. Like, I need answers.
Yeah, it definitely, the more I think about it, the more I'm pretty sure watching it all together would still feel disjointed. And in Steven Universe's case, like you said, it was because there'd be these massive breaks of nothing.
Yeah.
And it was written to be a weekly drop, as opposed to, you know, by each season, as opposed
fucking
to,
Steven
like,
bombs.
Massive. Yeah. So, yeah, and because it was written and expected to be a weekly drop instead of the Steven bombs, that's why that is, like, one that you can be more, understanding of and watch it all together. As opposed to this, which was written and designed to be weekly drops, so it should work as weekly drops.
Steven Universe is also a series that is, first and foremost, it is just like an episodic series that weaves in a greater narrative.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're upset that it's not getting back to the grander narrative, that's not like a problem with the show. That's just like you don't care about the bulk of what the show is, which is those episodic small character moments and adventures.
Steven Universe is very focused on character relationships and emotion more than the grander story.
Yeah, like the story is really good and it's there, but like it's a lot of character dynamics and interactions that lead into these big story moments. The reason like these story moments even land in Steven Universe is because like, you know, you spent so much little slice of life adventures with them and now big scary like real fucking conflicts. With Trigun Stampede, it's a serialized story. Like just the whole structure of this show has been really annoying to me from like the first episode. I really feel like the one super standout episode was what, episode 6? Where we were like, 6 out of 6. Woo!
Yeah, the Wolfwood and Levio backstory.
Yeah.
Because
like,
that was a very good way of having backstory while having present day events happening.
And it's not like the flashbacks ended and then suddenly they were off the sand steamer and somewhere else going, whoo, man, that sure was a crazy adventure.
Yeah, I want to see the adventure.
How did we get here?
Yeah, I do feel like it feels confused. And I think this goes hand in hand with the fact that we have a lot of first draft syndrome. is it feels like the writing team is confused on what the, like, basic bare bones setup of how this is supposed to be written is. It feels like they're not all on the same page, to the point where they don't even realize they're not all on the same page, so they're just kind of doing their thing and assuming everyone else is doing it like that, and so it ends up feeling disjointed and confused.
I feel like this show had to have had, like, a structure, like a plot outline of, like, we need to hit this point, this point, this point, this point, this point, and the writers have to fill in how we get from points A to B. Where in the case of this, they didn't fill it in. It was, we had a flashback and we came back to a whole new fucking location.
Oh, yeah. Because there is something in that, again, that actually is another symptom of first draft syndrome. Because when you're writing, and this is where, like, the discovery writing comes in for a lot of people. Contrary to popular belief, having discovery writer versus outliner is not a one or the other. It's a spectrum. And when the discovery writing comes in, it's like, as you're writing, even if you have your outline where you have every point planned out exactly, characters will grow and change, and story elements will come in and happen in ways that you weren't intending, and that changes where you end up going at certain points. I know that was like something that got brought up a lot when people were talking about Game of Thrones and how it ended, was they had a plan for how they wanted it to end. They didn't really build that up properly, and their characters kind of did their own thing, and then instead of adapting, they just went back to what they had originally planned. And so it could be like, when we're done with the backstory, we have to wake up at home, and not looking into considering how it connects to what happened before the backstory.
I'm not even upset that we went from cliffhanger to flashback. Because, like, you know, making you wait an episode to get back to that, that's fine. But, one, the backstory stuff was very disconnected to what was going on in the present. Because we know that they're plants, but I feel like a lot of it could have just been skipped over. And I feel like the only thing that even remotely makes the backstory connect to where it was, like where they left off, was that they wake up on the ship, that they wake up at home. That's the only thing that makes that backstory flashback even connect, because they had to wake up there. But it's like you didn't fucking bridge that at all. You just shoved the flashback in there.
Yeah, because, like, even Zazie the Beast showing up doesn't even connect to any of the flashback stuff.
Yeah.
That would have made just as much sense and worked just as well if you didn't have the backstory.
What would have changed if Vash had woken up on the Sand Steamer and then, oh fuck, Zazie kidnaps them? What changes? Why are we here?
In fact, it could have made more sense to have the backstory stuff if it was more contextualized as Vash passed out or whatever. He wakes up on home and sees Ludia and Brad, and then all that stuff happens. Zazie kidnaps Meroro and Roberto, and then conversations happen between both sides where it's like understood that everyone's hearing or talking about the backstory stuff. And that's Zazie explaining, oh, this is what humans did to knives and to all the plants, and this is how I know about what humans did to their previous planet, blah, blah, blah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Like, my brain just shattered for a moment. Okay, sorry to derail you, but,
Oh, no, go ahead.
The Sand Steamer was plowing towards the orphanage. They stopped the Sand Steamer right before the orphanage.
Yeah.
The story does not then lead into the setting being the orphanage. It moves to it being a fucking ship. Why was the target the fucking orphanage then? I mean, I understand, like, it was because of Legato, but, like, narratively, why couldn't they have been targeting Vash's home?
Yeah, and it would have made more sense. The Ion Cannon would have made more sense then, too, because you could have, like, sci-fi BS'd your way into saying we're cutting through this sandstorm with it.
Yeah, like, there's a lot of things you could have said. Like,
and it is kind of like, I am going to be salty now that we didn't get to see any kind of reunion or even almost reunion of Wolfwood, like, sadly looking at the orphanage and then deciding not to go in.
Very least, the next episode should have opened with them still on the Sand Steamer, and just like Vash is out cold. And then you could have had like Luita and Brad show up and be like, we're friends of his, we felt like an energy signature, we're here to help. And then you can jump to the flashback.
Yeah, and that would have brought more narrative purpose.
And you can contextualize who the fuck these people are.
That would have brought more narrative purpose to the Ion Cannon, because like you said, they saw a massive energy signature spike.
Yeah.
Now I'm starting to feel like that is what was intended, but it got cut, because it just feels so...
Like, something got changed. Like, I don't know. Like, this show is such a disjointed mess. Like, it's really frustrating, because, like, when the show is good, it's really fucking good. But so much of it feels so sloppily constructed that it really undermines all the good stuff. Like, I would love to see, like a rewrite of this take on Trigun.
And I did really enjoy watching this episode. Like I said, this is, like, the first time I felt genuine sympathy towards Knives and where he's coming from and what he's thinking. Like, I really enjoyed what this episode brought, and I had fun watching it. And that is, like, a feat in and of itself and worth mentioning. But also, that second half had me like, where am I? What's going on? I'm so confused.
For me, the real standouts on this episode is all the stuff with Knives, pretty much. Him watching the plants die, him murdering the technicians, Vash showing up, Knives genuinely wanting Vash to join him trying to protect Vash, of all people, from Luita, and then Vash pulling the gun on him. All that stuff. Great. No notes. Fantastic.
Beautiful. Chef's kiss. Wonderful.
The stuff with Zazie at the end, his whole monologue. Great. I love it. Wouldn't change any of it. Great stuff.
Agreed.
From the end of that flashback to the Zazie the Beast monologue, everything in between those 2 points is just a clusterfuck of scenes that needs to just kind of establish where we are, who's who's there. Oh fuck, they've been kidnapped. It is the bare minimum.
It's first draft syndrome, and here's the thing, right? When you're writing, if you get stuck on a scene you know you need to write, but you can't seem to get the words to work, and all you're thinking is what's coming up, and you really want to work on that, you put in parentheses, they talk about this. I'm just seeing now that first draft syndrome, the backstory stuff happens, and then in parentheses, Luita talks to Meryl and Roberto about flowers and plants as we know them IRL, right? And then parentheses, Luita comes running in to tell Vash and Brad that Meryl and Roberto got kidnapped. Write how they got kidnapped later. And then they went on to write the Zazie conversation. And then they forgot to go in and actually fill that stuff in. That's what it feels like.
Like, I really like the studio when they're adapting work. When they're doing their own original stuff, at least from this one example, it's pretty fucking subpar. Like, the scripting needs polishing, and it's just frustrating because I see legitimately great things here. It is different from the manga and the classic series in really interesting ways that make me want to see what it's gonna do different. But, like, I'm mostly sticking around, well, one, because of this podcast, but two, because I am a fan of Trigun and I want to see what this reinvention has to offer. Because every so often it drops me, like, some nuggets that I'm like, oh, that's really good. That's unique. I'm engaged.
Yeah.
And then they pull the rug out from under me and I bust my fucking nose on the floor.
It's the thing. It's like, we're not hate watching. We clearly genuinely like stuff. And it's not just like a passive, oh yeah, that was good kind of thing. It's like, no, we genuinely gave an episode 6 out of 6 because it just went really hard on everything. Like, it felt like it was just so good.
Yeah.
And again, I genuinely was super invested and really liked what they did with Knives in this episode. So it's like, it's not hate watching, it's just getting jerked around and getting whiplash with quality.
Oh, show you're being good. And then it goes, lol, JK.
Hold my beer. I do have one thought that I wanted to bring up when it comes to, like, the Knives and Vash backstory stuff. And this is one of those, like, as a previous fan of, like, the Trigun, like, the original anime, I miss the butterfly and spider conversation that happened. Because that was like, that is a scene from the original anime that had always stuck with me and really encapsulates everything that I loved the original series. Like, everything that I loved about Trigun could be found in that scene. It was a real philosophical, mature debate about the nature of pacifism and how, like, and its tendencies to be selfish, its tendencies to be short-sighted, but also the idea of still wanting to push for everyone to live, right? Because I don't know, for context for anyone listening and who don't really know what I'm talking about, in the original anime, there's a scene with Vash and Knives walking around as kids with Rim, and Vash sees a butterfly get caught in a spider's web, and the spider is slowly crawling over to get it. And Vash is, like, trying to figure out the best way to get the butterfly out of the web to save it. And Knives reaches in and just crushes the spider and just with a smile on his face says to Vash, it's easier to do it this way. And then they get into an actual fist fight, which, to my understanding, was the first time they got into a serious fight over the idea of Knives saying, no, it's stupid to try to say you can save both, because if you let the butterfly free, then what is the spider going to eat? It's going to end up starving to death. You're killing the spider anyways. And Vash arguing, what's wrong with me trying to save both anyways? I wanted to save both. And that whole scene was just, again, it was the first big sign of those two having a difference in philosophy, and it was a big, like I said, encapsulates what I always loved about Trigun and why it was considered my favorite anime of all time until I got to see an anime about making anime. I'm still missing that. There's not really something I can point to in this series so far that gave me that similar feeling and understanding, or that similar, like, real symbolic philosophical discussion on pacifism. I do really like the plants being directly, like, affected, and Knives seeing all of the plants dying, and how, like, yeah, now I understand specifically his philosophy on why he thinks, no, humans are a disease and we need to get rid of them. But I'm still missing that feeling of, like, pacifism is short-sighted.
I did want to say, like, I said, like, you know, no notes for, like, the beginning stuff, but actually, I do have a note, which was, they, from what we could tell, killed all those plants directly in front of Knives, where in the manga, like, the scene that it's referencing is Knives walking up to a plant that's on its last legs, and him seeing them being like, oh yeah, no, this is just, we're just gonna, like, pump it for, like, one last bit of power. And then, like, he watches the plant scream in pain and then fall into, like, this heap of blood and flesh, and he's just disgusted and angered by it.
Traumatized.
Yeah, like, he's just so pissed. And this is, like, an adult Knives seeing that. Where, like, I feel like they took that scene from the manga and they're like, okay, but let's just go ahead and crank it up to 11. Instead of being an adult, he's now a teenager, and instead of one plant, it's 100 of them.
All at once. All
Not necessarily like a problem, but it was just like a thing that stuck out to me, because I was like, oh, it's that thing from the manga. And then they, like, cranked the knob up on it.
I feel like that happens quite a bit in this series.
Oh yeah, no, like this anime gets pretty extra. Honestly, though, I definitely like the manga version more, just because it felt more visceral and more unsettling, especially, like, you know, when the plant collapses inside of the bulb, and it's just, like, this twisted mass of, like, blood and body, and Knives is just standing there looking at it, and it's just, like, there was something about that as opposed to it just kind of disintegrating into, like, dust. That was just more visceral for me. But the way this anime did it is fine. It's good. I just thought it was funny that they, like I said, just kind of cranked that knob up to 11.
Yeah, that is interesting. I do agree.
So, I've pretty much said everything. How about you?
Oh, there was one last note I wanted to make on a previous episode, not the last one we did, but the one before. We had asked, what do we think about again, if you know, you know, if you don't worry about it. Legato's backstory in the manga and how really dark and kind of trigger warning needed it is. One of us or both of us had made the comment of we don't really know where and when this anime is airing, what its target audience really is, what it's considered. And somebody in the comments had said it airs at around 11 p.m. in Japan.
Right.
But just to kind of point out that because it airs so late, it's very clearly meant to be a very mature, adults only, and not even just, older teenagers kind of thing, but, genuinely, this is 11 o'clock at night. People just got home from, the work party they were required to go to, you know?
This is definitely, the Adult Swim run.
Yeah, exactly. So it is, a little bit of a, might have to be concerned about if they are gonna adapt the Legato backstory the way we know it from the manga. Which again, if you know, you know. If you don't, you don't. But that's my 2 cents. If it's airing at 11 o'clock at night, there is a chance that it's gonna get...
It'll be the first podcast we do that starts with a trigger warning.
Yeah! And now anyone listening or watching or whatever will know that if they see or hear a trigger warning at the beginning of the episode, that's probably what it is!
So... scoring time. What are you going to give it out of 6?
I'm going to say 3 out of 6. Very close to leaning on the 2.5 out of 6. But I really think 3 out of 6 is a good way to put it. Because if I were to individually grade the 2 parts, the 2 halves of the episode, the first half would be higher, the second half would be much, much lower.
Yeah.
But it's all as one cohesive episode. It's half of this was really good, and the other half I was really confused, so you get half good score.
Yeah. I was trying to debate, what I wanted to give this episode, because the first half, there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, there's some pretty compelling stuff there. The latter half is a disjointed clusterfuck that ends on a really good monologue, oddly enough. I'm a little bit more positive than you, but I'm still gonna give it a 3. It's kind of edging between 3 and 3.5. Because I feel like it's just straight average. There are legitimately good things here, but there's also the bad things that we have come to expect from this adaptation. Just the first draft syndrome hit like a fucking brick in this episode.
Yeah. You know what I think? I think Knives needs to just get a plant union.
But then you have humans forming anti-plant lobbyist groups, spreading their anti-plant agenda and stripping all plants of any kind of rights. And then Knives gets to be Plant Malcolm X.